I've done a bit of block printing in the past. In fact, I have a how-to video you can check out if you're interested. And lately my wife has started to get into it as well. We print primarily onto fabric, like t-shirts and onesies and that kind of thing. And I've always just done it by hand, but I've started to get interested in using a printing press to get better results. All the commercial offerings for printing presses, though, are a little pricey for my taste, so I decided to try to build my own. All the printing presses I've seen use either a screw mechanism or some sort of roller mechanism, but I came up with an interesting alternative. The secret to my press is a caulk gun. Caulk guns are cheap, they're readily available, and they produce quite a bit of force. I got a caulk gun and some wood, and I built a simple printing press, and I'm going to show you how I did it. I built the frame of the press out of 1x6 and 1x4 dimensional lumber I had laying around. It originally came from one of the big box home centers. I cut 4 pieces of 1x6 to a length of 9 inches each with a hand saw. You can download free plans for this press by following the link below. Then I cut 1 piece of 1x4 to a length of 12.5 inches with a miter saw. I cut 1 piece of 1x4 to a length of 11 inches. I cut 2 pieces of 1x4 to a length of 9 inches each. I also used a piece of 1/4 inch plywood that I cut to 9.5 by 11 inches. I made this press so it could accommodate a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, but you could change the dimensions quite easily. You could very easily make the same press using 2x4s instead of 1x lumber. I glued together 2 of the 4 9-inch lengths of 1x6 to make a single sheet. I used 2 pieces of scrap wood as cauls to keep the wood flat as the glue dried. Then I glued the piece of plywood on top. This forms the base of the press. You could use hardboard instead of plywood, but I used plywood because I had it lying around. Then I glued together the other 2 pieces of 1x6 in the same way. This time I glued the 11-inch long piece of 1x4 across the joint. This forms the top piece that presses down on the block when printing. It might be a good idea to add a piece of plywood or hardboard to match the piece on the base, but I ran out of plywood, so I didn't, and it seems to work just fine without it. I can always add it later. When those pieces were dried, I took the base and the remaining pieces of 1x4 and constructed the top of the frame. I glued and screwed the 2 pieces of 9-inch 1x4 to the sides of the base. Then I glued and screwed the piece of 12.5-inch 1x4 to the top of those pieces. When that was dried, I drilled a 1-inch hole in the top brace. Then I took the caulk gun and cut away the barrel portion with a rotary tool. I should mention that you can't use just any old caulk gun. You need one where you can release the plunger without having to twist the rear handle. The very cheapest caulk guns usually aren't like this. I only spent $7 on this caulk gun and it works well. After cutting, I used a file to clean up the edges of the cut. I removed the plunger by unscrewing the nut holding it on. And I drilled 4 holes around the edge of the plunger. This is pretty tough metal and it took some time to drill through it. That's a good thing though. And then I lined everything up how I wanted it and marked and drilled the mounting holes in the wood. You'll notice that the caulk gun already has holes in it. Almost all the caulk guns I've seen come with those holes, so you don't need to drill new mounting holes in the metal, which is nice. Then I used some bolts, washers, and nuts to mount the caulk gun to the top brace. I reattached the plunger, leaving the nut just a little loose. This plunger came with a lock nut, so it shouldn't come loose even if it isn't tightened all the way onto the plunger. And then I used wood screws to mount the plunger to the wood. So here's the press in action. I inked up a block. I put a piece of cardboard down because I was afraid the ink might seep through the fabric, but I probably didn't need to do this. And I put a piece of t-shirt fabric over the cardboard and placed the block onto the fabric and pushed the top of the press down until it was just above the block. Then I used the grip of the caulk gun to press the block all the way down and apply pressure. Then I released the press and removed the block, and the print was done. So I think the press turned out pretty well. I've played around with it a little bit and I find that it works better than the old way I was printing, which is with a rolling pin. It's not a ton better. The rolling pin's actually pretty good and the press isn't perfect, but I find that it deposits a little more ink into the fabric and gives more consistent results. Plus the block is less likely to move around using the printing press than the rolling pin. I don't typically print to paper, but I did a couple quick tests with just plain paper in the press and the results were pretty good in my opinion. I hope you liked the video or found it helpful. If you did, give it a thumbs up. You can also subscribe to keep up to date with my newest videos. Thanks for watching. So I've done a bit of blah, and I built a simple printing press and I'm going to show you how. And it works better than the old method I was using. Dang it, man! The rolling pin's actually pretty good. Jesus, it's like 4 lines. I've played around with it a little bit and I find that it gives better result. Just kidding. Whoa. You can also subscribe to keep up to date with my newest videos. Thanks for watching. Ding!